Okay, so in this part we are going to start our texturing process. You can see that I've put some colors on our weapon, and I will use these colors to bake our masks or IDs, however you want to call this. This is how this texture looks with our colors, and I will use this as a mask, ID mask. And of course this one is 4096 pixels resolution, so it's pretty big. And for the first part of the texturing process I will use Dido. You can Google some basic tutorials, of course. And I always use Dido just for beginning. It's very good small program for creating base textures with some scratches or with some dirt. And after doing this I just manually adjust my textures, I add details, etc. So now you can see I've add our mesh, ID map, normal map and ambient occlusion map. And I've set calibration profile to Unreal Engine 4 because we are going to put our weapon into this engine. So it's pretty important. Of course you can set a path, and right now I select what kind of layers, what kind of maps we are going to generate. So I unchecked metalness and albedo for metalness because I was thinking that this might be a little bit too advanced, so I've just stick with albedo, a basic albedo, a gloss texture, ambient occlusion texture and normal map texture. And then you can create textures, and before doing this you are able to go into some options of your ID map and pick different materials for different colors, so you can assign a specific material to a specific color. It sometimes works and sometimes not, and the program is a little bit unstable sometimes. The one thing you should keep in mind that the colors on your ID map should be really different. I have some colors that might look similar, might have similar values, so the program wasn't recognizing sometimes what's going on. Okay, so after assigning our basic materials to the colors, we can hit create, and the program will create all these maps. So you can see we have some tabs on the top of the Photoshop with different textures, normal map, albedo, gloss texture, and ambient occlusion. So right now you can see I've launched a 3Do. This is a little program for a preview. We can preview how our mesh is looking with the textures. So right now we can see our weapon with just normal map and ambient occlusion map applied. You can change lighting in 3Do. You can choose different HDR images, and I'd like to choose this one with which is which is without any kind of color, because if the HDR image have some kind of yellow tint, for example, it just might affect your textures, and it's better to not have this kind of effects. So when we are ready, we can hit create, smart material. I've choose a gun material. This is a very basic material. In Dido you can see that we have lots of pre-made materials that are really great for starting. So you can see our gun material was applied for the model, and right now I'm choosing a mask that will be assigned to this shader. And of course I'm not sure why, but it didn't work the way I was expecting it. So I've opened the mask editor, and you see I'm trying to link this layer with the correct mask. And now we can see that our gun material was applied only for the parts where it should be. So these little details have right now a black material. So you can see how many materials we can use with different options. So I was looking for something for a main part of the weapon. So let's see how this one is looking. So this one also was applied for the weapon, and you can see we've got lots of scratches and lots of dirt on the surface. So I've choose the next material, military base material. So this one is pretty good material. Our weapon looks pretty realistic with this one, and I will apply this only for the main part of the weapon. So I've deleted this material that we created before, and right now I will just apply a mask. So you can see that this time when I pick a certain mask, it works without any problem. I didn't have to open a mask editor and linking the colors to a material. Everything is okay. And right now we are saving all maps. So let's assign another material for the other parts of the weapon. So I've speed up this part a little bit. Of course, I was looking for a material that will be good. And I've decided to choose this one that we have deleted previously. Of course, we will make some adjustments to this material, but I think it's pretty okay. So you can see I was trying to edit these scratches because they were pretty heavy. I was trying to make them less visible. So you can see these scratches are looking pretty okay, but I still think they are too heavy for our weapon. So you can see I turned them off completely, but still we have a lot of dirt, and this was caused by the sand layer. So I was always also checking how this looks without this layer. So also I was trying to decrease this mask, decrease the visibility of this sand, dirt. So this looks pretty okay to me. The amount of dirt and details is relatively good, and I also wanted to assign this material to only some parts of the weapon, and it also somehow didn't work at first, so I had to choose the color on the mask ID. So right now you can see we have this material applied. So you can see I've created the same material for this middle part of the weapon, and right now I just want to change some colors. So right now I'm choosing a little bit yellowish color for this main part of the weapon. And at first I wasn't sure what kind of colors I want to use, so I've done some tests. So you can see I've opened the Explorer and I'm looking for some references because I really wasn't sure what kind of colors we should do for this weapon. I have of course tons of references and I have some basic ideas, but I just want to open some images. So this one was pretty cool. I like the colors, maybe they are a little bit too dark, but we will do something similar. So you can see I'm making all my colors a little bit darker and less saturated. Of course, all these colors we can change later manually in Photoshop rather than making adjustments to these dedo layers. So I wasn't worried really about the final result that we have here in the 3D preview. I was just trying to make something that looks relatively okay. So right now I was trying to add some scratches to this dark metal. So I've added another layer called dusty metal, and we have to create a mask for these scratches. So I choose something like top fumes, and we have to make some adjustments to this because I want them to be a little bit more visible, and of course I would like to break them a little bit with some texture because they are really straight lines sometimes. So you can see I choose a concrete texture to break these straight white lines a little. So Dedo is very good program for doing things like that. We can really quickly generate some dirt masks, some scratch masks and stuff like this. It would take us a very long time to create this manually. Of course, these kind of results that we can see right now are not the final results. We will do a little bit manual work around this, but it's a very good starting point for making our textures. So right now I was trying to add for another part a material. I wasn't sure which one. I wanted something that looks more like a plastic. Uh, So you can see, unfortunately, this plastic material was applied for the weapon, for all the parts of the weapon, and I wanted only for few of them this kind of material. Right now I was trying to make this noise on the surface of this material a little bit less visible, so the surface will be a little bit smoother. So that's better. But I was trying to assign this material to the ID that we've generated from Maya, but unfortunately I wasn't able to do this, and this was probably because this ID color was pretty close to another ID color which I use for the black metal, and it just didn't work. Something didn't work, so I gave up this material. So like I said on the beginning, we should really be sure at the beginning that our mask that we are generating for the IDs have a really different colors. So you can see for this part I have this light gray, and for the black metal I have a darker color, and something just didn't work. Anyway, we can fix this manually, creating this material, for example, the for all parts of the weapon, and manually create a mask in Photoshop. So it's not a big problem, of course. So for now I've just turned off this layer, and we will move just forward. And of course I was trying to add a little material for a little part that looks more like a silver, like a polished metal or something like this. And this part is somewhere around the barrel. So this one wasn't good. It was a little bit too dark and I didn't like the texture. and you can see the ID mask for the silver works pretty okay. For the silver mask ID I had this light, very light gray color, so the program didn't have any problems with reading this. So maybe it didn't look like a silver, but we will work on this part also. Okay, so right now you can see that I have still my layers in Photoshop, and I just want to select on our mask one material because I would like to change a color of this. I thought I would just select a part of this on my mask and make some adjustments, but of course we have all these layers generated by Dido and they work pretty okay, so we can use these layers to tweak colors and some of the details that Dido generated. So you can see I've been able to double click on this layer and pick the color that I want to use. So we have all these controls still available. We can also experiment a little bit with this pattern overlay, but the results were a little bit poor, so I was just continuing our texturing process. You can see that we can make all these adjustments, like decreasing opacity and adding details to our masks, and or deleting some scratches, etc. So like I said at the beginning, I'm using mainly Dido for generating this kind of basic textures, and I'm just opening the layers that Dido generated, and I manually add a really fine small details or some additional textures. So right now you can see that I've changed the color of the scratches on this part of the weapon. I think it will be more interesting with darker metal below this green paint. Of course you can see I still have 3Do open, and I want to see my results in 3Do. So we can hit a refresh button in Dido, and of course everything works fine. Of course we have to be really careful with these layers in the Photoshop, because if we will destroy something there, we might have some problems. But if we are making just small adjustments, not deleting these layers or doing something other with them, it should be fine. So you can see I've selected a mask for this layer. This is a scratch layer, and we are able, of course, to make some scratches. Of course, this is just a preview, and my scratches are pretty ugly right now, but it's just to give you the idea that these layers are there, and even after closing Dido we can make pretty good adjustments on our own with Photoshop, and everything will work fine. Of course, if we make some adjustments to this layer, this mask layer in albedo texture, we also have to make these adjustments into a gloss texture, for example. Of course, in this case we can just duplicate the mask into a gloss layer and everything will be okay. So this part of the creation process will be a really more traditional, because we are doing everything without using Dido, or we are using Dido right now just to make a preview. So you can see I keep adding these metal scratches. Okay, so I wanted to preview my results in 3Do. So again, click refresh icon. Of course, I've made some unwanted glitches, but you can see we can easily remove this because this is just a mask and not a normal layer. So I really wasn't sure if I'm getting my details in 3Do, so I've made this little big T letter on the side of the weapon, and yes, everything works fine. So probably my adjustments were so small that I'm not able to see them. So you can see on the top of this weapon that I finally found my scratches. And you can see right now that I've switched to gloss layer because I want to duplicate this adjusted mask to my gloss texture. And of course at the beginning I was figuring out how this texture works in the gloss texture, You see, of course, that we have to change the color. So I'm looking right now for these scratches on the gloss layer, and let's save it and see if we can see any changes in 3Do. And yes, of course, there is a very small effect, but it works. So you can see right now I've created another layer, and I will set this layer to an overlay, and I will make some very subtle adjustments to the surface of this part. And what I will do, I will just add a little bit of brightness on the surface, so the edges will be a little bit darker. And I'm doing this because I don't want the surface to be that kind of flat. This will add just a little bit of depth to the texture. So you can see right now I've switched to the layer where we have our dirt mask or dirt layer, and I'm just removing some parts of this dirt. There are some kind of straight lines that I don't like. Barely visible, but they were. So you can see for each material we have a separate group, so it's pretty easy to navigate between these layers. So when you have a lot of materials, it might be scary at the beginning because Dido is really generating tons of these layers. So right now I'm just making some adjustments to this black material, and I wanted this black material layer a little bit brighter. I don't want 100% black material here. So you can see on this black material we have tons of white scratches. We can of course add them to our texture. So the same thing like with the previous material, we can easily make adjustments. Of course, again, these are my scratches are pretty bad right now, but we will improve them later. This is just to show you that it can be done pretty quickly and easy. Of course, this part was pretty difficult for me because the screen resolution is very small and the texture are huge, and I have my brush options, my layers, my preview, so it was pretty difficult to work this way. So you can see we are able to make some adjustments around these screws. So again, I was trying to check if changing the pattern options will do something, but the result is barely visible, so okay, so you can see I've choose another brush and I was adding some scratches here. Okay, and we are moving forward to another layer. And I also wanted to change the color of this a little bit. So you can see that I refresh our preview, and right now we can see how these colors are coming together on this weapon. So I've switched to the gloss texture, and I wanted to make it a little bit brighter to see what kind of effect I will get. So it looks not bad. Of course, I will be adding a lot of details manually in Photoshop. So I think for this part of the weapon work with Dido is almost finished. Of course, at the beginning I will be adjusting my albedo and previewing this albedo in Maya rather than in 3Do. And after finishing albedo I will just adjust the gloss texture and maybe normal maps a little bit. So one more thing I want to show you right now is, let's say for example we want to add a little bit more dirt to the model of this weapon, so it's like covered with some dust or the sand or something like this. We can pretty easy turn on Dido and go back to our layers and add another layer without any problems. So I was trying to add a smart material, but unfortunately we have to just add just a material rather than smart material. And I choose the sand at the beginning. Let's see what result we are going to get. So all the surface of the weapon is covered with this sand. It's pretty heavy right now, and what we have to do is just create another mask, and it is already a mask called sand, so I'm going to choose this one because it works just best for this kind of effect. So this kind of detail like the dust or the sand will pretty nicely blend all parts of the weapon together. So it's starting to look somehow, but the effect is still pretty too heavy. we have to scale down the material a little bit. So I was trying to choose a different material for this sound effect. But this one was worst, so I go back to the previous. So we just have to scale down our details. And the -3 was a little bit too much, in my opinion. And we have this ugly normal map, I think, going on the surface, which I don't like. I would like to have just a smooth dust effect. But this upper part looks pretty nice, I think. So you can see I went to a normal map and take down the texture intensity. And I was experimenting with the scale of the texture. So I still don't like the noise on this sand texture. There is too much black dots on this sand. So you can see right now this everything looks better because I switched to this dread mood. I switched just the material to a dread mood, dried mood. So anyway, everything looks pretty cool. The sand or the dust is very smooth and clean. And maybe it's too much of it, but we can of course adjust this. And we can adjust it using just Dedo, or we can just switch to Photoshop and manually tweak the mask. So you can see in Photoshop we have our mood texture on the top of the layer list. So this is this one, and we can go and select mask and adjust this. I'm not going to do anything fancy here. I'm just going to show you that it's possible to make some changes manually. So you can see we can add a little bit of dust around these screws, which looks pretty cool. So as I said, I think that the effect was a little bit too intensive, so I've turned down opacity a little bit. So let's save everything and see how it looks in a 3D. So it looks really okay. So you can see that in a relatively short period of time we've been able to generate a very good textures using 3D. Of course, if we are looking for something more polished, for let's say a main character weapon, we should definitely spend more time and manually adjust the textures, adding some fine details. Of course, I will uh, make some adjustments to this barrel part, because this front part, it doesn't look like a metal, it's just white right now. I really like this dust coming between these parts. So I think that's it for this part of the tutorial.